Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Love Fruit podcast. And this is a series of interviews. We like to interview people interested in the raw vegan, fruitarian, raw foods style diet, share their stories with you, and yeah, and maybe hope to encourage you a little bit. If you want to follow us a little bit more, you can go to fruitfest.co.uk and you can find some more information there about the festival that we're involved in. So anyway, today's guest is Brett Canaday, also known as Juice Feaster on Instagram, I believe. Brett leads the Juicer Test Kitchen, utilizing his 25 years in the juice production and formulation industry. Amazing. Looking forward to talk to you about that. Brett not only has a career background in the juice world, he has personally transformed and maintained his health using the magical powers of juicing and raw living foods. Awesome, Brett. So thank you very much. Is there anything else you want to say about yourself to start off?
No, just thank you for the opportunity to speak with you and be on your podcast. And I've followed along on your channels for quite some time, so it's an honor to speak with you for sure.
Amazing, amazing. So, Brett, how does it start off for you? Were you brought up on a conventional kind of a diet?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the central Midwest of the U.S. in a small rural town just northeast of Indianapolis, Indiana. So about 3 hours south of Chicago to give people a reference of
Right.
where I was
Yeah.
at. And I grew up on a fifth generation farm. My family was farmers. They homesteaded the area in the 1830s. 1837 was the first uh, property that they settled on in that area, and they were, uh, subsistence farmers, land farmers, agricultural folks from day one in that area, growing livestock and crops in that area. So I grew up in that environment. By the time I came around, farming had changed quite a bit. I was born in the early 70s. And so as I was a young boy, farming was changing from smaller parcels of land to, it was growing, farm equipment was growing, and it was becoming more monocultural and less
Yep.
crop rotations and those types of things. But while I was growing up, I had a pretty magical upbringing where there were lots of small fields and hedgerows and fence rows, and you could go from one field to the next, and it was like a new adventure with streams and creeks and
Wow.
forests. And so it was a really good upbringing. I had a fun upbringing, and for a
On a
child
farm.
it was awesome. Yeah.
Were you anywhere
So
near? Were you anywhere near Huntington, Indiana?
very close. Well, about an hour and a half from Huntington. How do you know of Huntington?
I had a there was a man that used to attend the Woodstock Fruit Festival. He attended every year from the start, and he was from Huntington. He passed away, unfortunately.
Oh, no
I
kidding.
went out to visit him. Well, it must be 4 years ago now, maybe something like that, 4 or 5. So I stayed for like maybe a week or something, or
No
a little bit
kidding.
over it in Huntington. Yeah. So
Small world.
yeah,
What was
yeah.
what was his name?
His name was Bill Lesh.
I never did
Yeah,
meet him.
I think he was a train driver and stuff. But
Okay.
yeah, it's interesting. It's always interesting that people think they're the only person around that is into an alternative diet or lifestyle, but there's actually kind of people all over. They just don't bump into each other sometimes. So, so yeah, so that sounds like a really interesting childhood, and also how is that informed, like the way you look at food or food supply or whatever, growing up on the farm? What were you growing? Like, what were the crops?
So we as I was growing up, we had livestock, so we had both sheep and cattle,
Right.
and so there was definitely grains, corn and soybeans and wheat, hay, alfalfa hay and things of that nature, clover hay. And as I was growing up, my dad was kind of transitioning out of that more multi-crop rotation into just like corn, soybeans, corn, soybeans, corn, soybeans, back and forth. But some of the crops were sold, to market, and some were used to feed the livestock. And
Yeah.
it definitely shapes the way I look at things, because I lived it. I lived the lifestyle where we raised these animals. We would help give birth to them and steward them, and then take them to market. So I understand what that was all about.
Yeah.
We would have 4-H animals, and you'd take care of them all summer long, and then show them at a fair, and then put them on a
Right.
trailer and send them to
Right.
market. And so it was one of those things that we, in a way, kind of joked about, like, well, this is their last supper. It's like we kind of sloughed it off a little bit, just because it was how we viewed life at that, in that moment, I guess, for me. And it really wasn't until much later in my life that I kind of had a change of mindset about just sending animals off to market. And it was less,
Right.
I had gone to college and got a degree and was working in industry, still kind of agriculturally related, with commercial juices as opposed to like fresh juices. But it wasn't until I was also a hunter. I grew up hunting and
Oh, wow.
trapping. And so I did all of these things. I was a Boy Scout. I did all of these things that you do as a young man growing up in rural America.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until after I graduated college, I was actually deer hunting. I lived in Wisconsin for a short period of time, and I remember it was a fall morning in Wisconsin, and I was deer hunting, and I shot a doe deer, a white-tailed deer. And I remember going up to that deer after I had harvested it and putting my hand on it, and it was still warm. This deer was still warm, and I was like, I can't do this anymore.
Oh, wow.
I just can't do this anymore.
Can I,
And
yeah, can I say a little bit about hunting? Like, I've never really went hunting, and I've not been on farms that much. I remember being on a farm in South Africa, and the guy had a gun, and we were going out in a truck, and I was with my friend, and we were sort of having this conversation, like, if he gave you the gun, could you shoot something? We weren't really sure, right? So, but I was a meat eater back then, and I'm just interested in hunting, like, because there are people obviously brought up hunting and things, but is there always a sense that they're like, there's something kind of weird going on? Like, is there always a sense like there's something uh unusual about this, or is I don't know, are people so caught up in it that they don't think that? But that's what I'm imagining with you, is I'd be thinking about the deer. Does it have a family? Does it have, like, I just, all these things go through my mind, and I don't know if other people are just going to shut off from that.
yeah, I think growing up, I was shut off from it just because it was so normal.
Yeah.
Everyone did it. It was less normal if you didn't. It was less normal if you didn't do it. So I think it wasn't really until I kind of got away from the farm and went to college, and was able to listen to some other different perspectives about it and think about it differently. It ultimately, I think what I realized at that moment when I put my hand on that deer that had, just died, that I had just killed, was that I enjoyed the hunting aspect up until that point. Like, I enjoyed being in
Right.
nature, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed the pursuit, if you
Yeah.
will, to
Yeah.
see them and to view them. And that it's like it's a dopamine rush to come into contact with these wild animals. And I hunted squirrels and rabbits from a very young age, like small game. It
Yeah.
wasn't until later in years that I hunted deer. But it wasn't until that point that I realized that I enjoyed everything up to that point. Like I enjoyed everything up to pulling the trigger,
Yeah.
and at that point it was no longer good. Like at that point
Right.
it was no longer like the feeling that I felt, and even field dressing the animal and cutting it up and all these things, like it never appealed to me. Like, and even
Yep.
eating it, like it never appealed to me that much.
Right.
It was everything leading up to that point that I enjoyed. And so I think I was just shutting all that off because that's what I grew up in. That's what I
Yeah.
accepted as normal. And so it wasn't until that point that I said, no, this isn't what I need to do anymore.
I met a guy once as well that he was a young guy that he was vegan, but he used to be a hunter, and he almost explained it to me that it was that there was a bit of a rush in killing an animal. I don't know if everyone feels.
Mm.
He felt like when you actually kill the animal, that there's a weird sort of thrill to that in a way. I don't know if that's the same with everyone.
Yeah, there's definitely an adrenaline um, spike there for sure. You're they would call it buck fever. Like if you would see a buck deer, like it's a a level, your heart rate increases, and I'm sure your hormones are changing. It's I'm sure a primeval safety mechanism if you're faced with a
Right.
wild animal. But in a modern world, there's no reason why we should ever have to engage in that. So I think it was an extreme letdown for me, like the the come down for that, dragging this animal out of the woods and then hanging it up and
Oh,
cutting it
geez.
open, and the smell when you would open up the abdominal cavity. It's like, this isn't what I should be doing. And I just stopped.
Yeah.
And it was several years after that that I stopped eating meat. Um, I guess logically speaking, in that moment when I stopped hunting, I should have said, hey, I shouldn't even be eating this stuff. But it was many years after that it took me something else to come to the realization that I probably shouldn't even be eating this stuff.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm quite interested in what you're saying about working in commercial juicing, and that's quite interesting. And like, uh, well, firstly, what was it you were doing? How did you end up in that?
Yeah. So the way it worked for me, I lived on a small farm, so it wasn't the size of farm that one based on conventional mechanisms could think about coming back to the farm and making a living out of it. My father actually taught school for 40 years. He was the first person, he was the fourth generation farmer, but he was the first generation that wasn't able really to make a living on that smaller parcel of land. So he had to go to college and get a degree, and he taught biology and chemistry for 40 years to really kind of support the farming habit,
Yeah.
if you will, or
Yeah. Yeah.
farming lifestyle. So for me, it was even more apparent that I wasn't going to be able to really make that type of farming existence work for me. So I wanted to stay involved with agriculture. So there was a degree option called food science, food chemistry, which is basically the reason why we have all the processed foods in the world that we have are because food scientists and food chemists are the people who figure out how to take food or food-like substances
Yeah.
and make them and package them and distribute them around the globe. So
Uh-huh.
I got this degree at Purdue University in Indiana, and my first job out of school was with a cranberry juice company in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the
Wow.
second leading grower of cranberries in the United States. And so the company that I worked for had been historically a grower of cranberries, and they were diversifying into juices to go up against the likes of Ocean Spray cranberry juice and
Yeah.
other juice products on the market.
Yeah.
So when I was hired, I was actually hired to assist them in formulating juice beverage products, to make sure that they tasted good and to also match other competitors' products.
Yeah.
And then we actually didn't bottle it. We would send our ingredients to bottling companies around the country. And it was my job to go and oversee their packaging operations and make sure that they were formulating things correctly during processing. And then if they had problems, troubleshoot their production. So that was my first gig in the juice world.
So I might have missed something there. Were you, so the company you're working for, were they taking the cranberries and turning it into like the concentrate that was then getting given to the bottlers?
Exactly. So what they
Right.
did, they made both cranberry concentrate. So they would initially make cranberry juice out of the cranberries. They had a huge freezer that they would bring berries in, and they would, I think they had, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time ago now, that first job, but they had, I think, around 40 million pounds worth of um, frozen fruit storage. So they could come bring this fruit in, clean it from the cranberry bogs, and freeze it in 2,000-pound totes or 1,000-kilo totes, essentially. And uh, then they would process it from there. So grind it up, press it, and then that would be a single strength juice, like 7 or 8 brix in terms of sweetness levels. And then they would evaporate the water out of it and concentrate it into um, about 60 brix. So it's basically like a cranberry syrup,
Right.
really thick. And the reason why they do this is uh, it's expensive to ship water. So
Right.
they would ship this concentrated juice to manufacturers in New York, North Carolina, California, Oregon. We had some packaging plants in Oklahoma, so kind of centrally located throughout the country. And then we would ship them flavors, very concentrated natural flavors, and then they would use their water and remanufacture the cranberry or the grape or the apple, and put it back together, put it in a bottle. They would basically pasteurize it at 190 degrees Fahrenheit and hot fill it into plastic bottles, and then it would cool down in a cooling tunnel, and they would label it and package it up, and away it would go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Really interesting to hear the details to all that. So, as you were saying, because they don't want to ship water because it's so heavy, um, they concentrate that. So that's the model of the whole kind of juicing industry, like that. The
It
concentrate
is.
sent around, and then you're saying, so the pasteurization is quite hot then,
Very hot. Yeah, it's
right?
just shy of steam. Steam is 212, so it's just shy of 200
Close to
degrees.
boiling, right? Yeah,
Yes, yeah. Very, very hot. And part of my job was to review these pasteurization temperature records to verify that if it got below a certain point, there was a risk of yeast or molds growing in the juice bottle,
right.
even after it was packaged.
And how long did they expose it to that kind of heat for?
Very short period of time. It's like a flash, you know. I think HTST is maybe, it's been a while since I've done that side of the business, but it's just a few seconds. It's not very long at all.
Oh
It's
wow,
just it's a short, high temperature, short time pasteurization, but it's enough. We had label claims for vitamin C and that sort of thing, and we would have to add like 1,000% of the vitamin C in the blending process before it was pasteurized. because the heat would flash it off. It would just destroy it.
Wow.
And so we would have to add so much extra to make sure that we ended up slightly above our label claim, because then even after pasteurization, there's a slight degradation over time, just in a
Yep.
clear plastic bottle.
And what I've heard as well about pasteurized juices is that there's, and you mentioned the natural flavors, there's the kind of juice packets thing, like, and this will happen even where different parts of the world have different flavorings and things like that. So that's how the flavor is consistent. Is that, so for example, a juice could say 100% cranberry juice, but what they've done, not only have they concentrated it and then added the water back, flash pasteurized it, but they've also added flavor packets that have been created from cranberries. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, and so you really have to pay attention to the labels and the ingredient statements, and if they're being truthful to what they're adding to the product, by law they have to list what's in the ingredients, what's in the package, in the ingredient statement. And so there are some really high quality juices out there that are not from concentrate, that are made from single strength juice. So like, say for example, if I pressed some apple juice here in my kitchen and I had a small pasteurization unit, I could package that and it would taste pretty decent. Like, it wouldn't taste too bad. But if you run it through an evaporation, piece of equipment, an evaporator, and at such a high temperature to evaporate off all the water and then add water back to it, there's no apple flavor left to it. These volatile aromas and things, these phytochemicals that make up flavors and aromas, are very heat sensitive. And so as soon as you hit them with any kind of heat and air and flowing in a pipe, they go away very quickly. So essentially what you're left with is apple sugar, or white grape juice sugar. And so it just has kind of a caramelized, sugary flavor. And if you add the water back to it to reconstruct the grape or the apple or the cranberry or whatever it is, it just tastes like sugar water with a little bit of acidity. And so in order to sell this, they have to flavor it. And so that's where these flavor chemists come in, these master flavor chemists. And these guys are like the gods and goddesses of the food industry, because they take these products that are industrially produced and they wave their magic wand in the lab and extract a chemical from here and a chemical from there and a molecule from this, and they put these things together to push and pull flavor nuances to recreate virtually anything. I worked for a short period of time in the popcorn industry, and butter flavor is one that the flavor world just spends millions of dollars on to recreate, because butter is expensive and there's issues with diacetyl and popcorn lung disease and all these things happen with butter flavorings. And so they can make a brown butter flavor and a fresh green, like green grass butter flavor, and a fresh dairy butter, and a whole cream butter flavors. Like you can come up with any number of things. So that's where these flavor chemists would sell us, flavor companies would sell us a cranberry flavor or a grape flavor or a red raspberry flavor, or you name it, any kind of fruit flavor, or if we wanted to make a special variety like a cranberry grape with a hint of jalapeno pepper. There was no jalapeno pepper that ever came close to this factory. It was a flavor, like it was a manufactured flavor. It's so that's a fascinating world.
Yeah, that's what the phrase natural flavors means when it's on the pack.
Yeah, and so there are rules with where the origin of these flavor components come from as to whether they can call it a natural flavor or an artificial flavor. And where those lines are drawn and who they're drawn by, I'm not exactly sure. I'm assuming the FDA here in the USA is what denotes those, but where they push and pull these flavor notes from and molecules from to concoct these highly concentrated, and they're highly expensive flavors too. For a 50-gallon drum, it was thousands of dollars for these drums of flavor, and it wouldn't take very much for a 10,000 gallon batch. I don't know what that would be in liters, but very little flavor would go into these things because they're so concentrated. And they're alcohol extracts typically. So think like vanilla extract, like an alcohol extract where they've soaked it or extracted it, chemically speaking. That's how these flavors are extracted.
Amazing. It's very interesting. And how did that all shape? Like, did you see anything particularly bad going on? Did you ever think like, this is really, people wouldn't want to drink this stuff if they saw it? Like, and I'm even talking about like, could it be, was it very clean, very sort of management, or I've heard all sorts of nightmare things about. I remember someone telling a story about like an orange juice plant or something, and there was like mice in it, and they were somehow, and all this kind of stuff. But how was the fact that you've seen behind the curtain of all that? How did that affect your choice towards, or your thoughts towards like processed juice? Like what was your overall feeling towards it?
Well, I worked there for about 2 years, and I honestly, as a new youngster out of college, new lad out of college, I was disgusted with it, to be frank. And I left. I during my last year of I worked at that company for 2 years, and during my last year of the 2 years, I knew that I really wasn't going to be able to go on much longer with it. So I did an independent study to become an organic farm inspector. And at that point in time, this was in the late 90s, so like 97, 98. It was before the USDA got involved with organic certification. So I did a series of classes and independent coursework to become a third-party organic farm and processor inspector. So there was a certifying body, there was the farm, and then there was an independent inspector. So I was that inspector. The inspecting body would send me a file, and I would drive to this processing plant or to a farm, and I would do an audit and write a report as to whether they were following rules, following guidelines with processing or with growing or any of those things. So I left the industry completely after a couple of years, just by virtue of what I saw with the processing industry. And you ask about things that I saw some immaculate plants, like pristine stainless steel, hyper clean plants. And then I saw some where there were piles of apples in the fall, and like rats were running in and grabbing an apple and running back outside, So I saw all extremes of the food industry based on where we were processing at and what we dealt with. Some really good places and some really not so good. And I saw just in the 2 years that I worked for that cranberry juice company, I saw the rise and fall of cranberry juice concentrate prices. It was like it went from a kind of a very stable industry to pricing skyrocketed for cranberry juice concentrate, and it became this super high value product.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of science being pushed about the phytochemicals and antioxidant capabilities and the ORAC score and all these things around cranberries and lingonberries and some of these
Yeah.
other super fruits.
Yeah. In
And
the
so,
UK, I mean, there seems to be in many people's mind there's a connection with cranberries as being sort of anti-cancer in a way.
yeah, and so this was being pushed very heavily,
Yeah.
and a lot of it being pushed by industry and growers because they had quantity of it and they wanted to have these studies. So I'm always a little skeptical when I see these studies that come out about you should drink 3 glasses of red wine a day because of resveratrol. Like uh, these things get pushed. These studies get paid for by industry a lot. But at
Yeah.
any rate, I saw because of the super high value of cranberries and cranberry juice concentrate when I was there, I saw some instances where some very substandard fruit in totes, 2,000-pound totes covered in white mold, just like it looked like um,
For,
wool. It was
yeah,
like
yeah.
a pile of wool in this
Wow.
tote, and seeing the plant supervisor saying, run it, it's
Oh
juice.
my God.
And they would rely upon just the processing equipment and the microfilter to filter out as much of the um, viable yeast and mold
Oh,
cells as they
wow.
could and get it. And they would blend it, they would cut it, they would say, all right, we have to blend no more than 5% of this shitty juice in with this batch of
Oh
juice.
my
So
God.
they would really work to blend and cut and navigate it so that there was zero loss. And I mean, that's
Crazy.
industry and that's capitalism, I guess. Like gotta go where the action is. So I opted out, and I opted out for uh, 3 or 4 years. I did organic farm and processing inspections until the USDA got involved and streamlined the standards to their liking, and it became a little more dilute at that point in time. I think you had a post about organic and residues and things like that, and I think maybe prior to a certain time there was a little more holistic view of organic and pesticides and
Yeah.
herbicides.
I I definitely I'm I was trying to think back to why there was a point where I stopped being concerned or that interested in organic as an issue. And I was trying to wonder, when did that happen? Why did I stop worrying about it? And I remember coming across, and this is I'm quite happy to hear all your side on this, and you've got a lot of experience in farming. But I think there was a guy on YouTube, there was an English actually, and he happened to have a piece of land and he would grow as a kind of hobby, slight part-time business. He would grow like rare apple varieties on his own little farm, his own little orchard, and then he would sell them at a local market. And he was just like really interested in the fruits, and and then people found him on YouTube, and he'd be sending apple scions around the world to all these different people
Oh,
and all this kind of stuff. So he was called Stephen Hayes. I don't think he's very active on his channel, but I think he's still around. But and I remember he just had this video where he said that he'd been trying to be organic. Like that was always his intention, was not to use anything, and he just got to a point where he just felt like he couldn't do that anymore, and he started to explain the whole thing, and then he kind of showed that he was kind of explaining how little chemicals he used and how it's very like controlled and blah blah. And he was just saying like he would just lose so much of his apples
yeah,
if he didn't do any of these things. And and he tried all the other things. Like when people would say to him,
yeah,
haven't you tried this and companion planting? And he said that he had tried these things and it hadn't really helped. And so at that point I sort of thought, I started to realize like I don't really know what it is from the farmer's perspective, and I'm being a bit naive to think that that I know anything about this. And at the end of the day, all my life I've eaten this food and it's not caused me any fruits never caused me any harm. So like why would I get too worried about it? Um, and looked into it more, and certainly um, I've had a number of people with running the festival. I've had a number of people, a small number, but a certain number of very passionate people that are very concerned about organic, like very, very concerned about it.
Mhm.
And funnily enough, it was a number of them were from the US, and they would get very like how do we get more organic? How can we make this happen? And they get almost quite angry about it. And I've the more that I looked into it, the more I looked into it, from what I could find, I I found all information that seemed to suggest like none of this stuff was as bad as people thought in terms of conventional farming. And looking into it recently, I don't know, but and this is the thing, it's like I don't know the sources for a lot of this information, but you can find sources that suggest there's not a great deal of difference in terms of nutrition or even, and then there's some skepticism about whether the environmental is even better. And then recently today, actually, just before speaking to you, because I'm still interested, I'm still like looking
Sure.
to figure this out because I'm partly I post about these things sometimes to get a response and see some people will say, well, actually, you're wrong about this or whatever, so I can look into it. And it was a farmer from the UK, and he said, this is quite interesting because he uses nitrogen on his fields. Now,
Mhm.
this is all like wheat and stuff and barley, and I'm a raw vegan. I don't really eat bread or whatever or pasta, so maybe it doesn't apply. But what he was saying was, if he was to go organic and take away the nitrogen fertilizers that he was using, the synthetic nitrogen, that his the yield of his crop would go down by 50%. And to replace, if he was to try and replace that with the organic alternative, they'll get the organic alternative is animal manure.
Mhm.
And then he said, if we were to try, if every farm went organic, we'd need 1 billion extra chickens to produce the,
Mhm.
right? So he was saying, so either we need more animals, which they're saying, and he was saying, we're being told that everyone wants to go, everything's going towards veganism now, and we want less animals. But if we go organic, we need more animals.
More animals.
What's the message? And the price of fertilizers is rising, so he was talking about all that. But um, and then he did the video about Roundup, and a lot of people talk about glyphosate and Roundup, and he was just saying we've been using this stuff for years, and we've not seen these problems that everyone's talking about. And um, but I don't know what's your whole history in this with your background and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think, my thought is in an ideal world as a consumer and a fruit eater, I would prefer there not to be synthetic chemical residues on produce, just from a, puritanical standpoint. Like the highest the highest ideal for me would be to have just like amazing fresh ripe fruit that didn't require synthetic chemicals applied to it, and that the soil microbiome and all these mycorrhizae and all these things that really make a symbiotic growing environment and nutrient uptake and minerals and all these things. I mean, in an ideal world, that would be the best. And I've tasted fruit and tasted produce grown on smaller scales that have just kind of rocked my world
Yeah,
with sugar content and depth of flavor and color and all these things. It's very difficult to do, though. I think it's very difficult to do. And like the gentleman you mentioned that was growing apples, there's just some things it's very difficult to grow without it. I've seen it done, but like you say, like the grain grower was saying, the yields go down. You're dealing with more insect damage and rot damage and fungus damage and things of that nature. So if it can be produced without it, I'm all for it. But if it can't, I get this question a lot on my channel. If do you only juice organic produce? And my first thing is yes, as long as it's not astronomically priced, and it's high quality. And honestly, I would rather it be high quality over anything, because if it's unripe and it doesn't taste good, I'm not going to want to eat it, and I'm not going
Yeah.
to want to juice it. And so I would much rather, I recommend people to eat raw living foods in any format that they can get them, preferably organic, but produce, raw living foods, conventionally grown is way better than none at all, in my opinion. I'm
Sure.
with you in that it's way better to eat conventional, higher quality conventional produce than not eat it at all.
Yeah, I mean, so you mentioned something there where you were talking about the standards changing and the USDA getting involved in this kind of thing. And so looking at organic standards, because a lot of people assume it's no pesticides or it's no chemicals or it's whatever, no interference, whatever they have an idea. And even in the dictionary, it seems to say that. Um, but the standards are actually don't suggest that. There is times when the farmers are allowed to use things if they have proved that they need to, I think is the idea. But what was it you were referring to when you were talking about the USDA getting involved in standards changing? What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so when I opted out of the organic world in terms of being an inspector, it was apparent to me that the standards were being loosened a little bit to allow larger, more commercial type operations to have a little bit of a toehold into the industry. And it came down to, say, for example, like dairy. If there was an organic dairy operation prior to USDA, and I'm not up to date at all on current standards, but at the time they were proposing that forage or silage or hay that was being fed to organic dairy cows didn't necessarily have to come from organic farms. Just things like that, like where they would just take a little bit of the stringency and purity out of the rules and allow a little more leeway to allow industry to have an easier opportunity to get involved.
Yeah.
Crop rotation time, like there was a regulation for, there was a huge push for organic clear Highland soybeans for tofu, and a lot of the growers in the Midwest and upper Midwest, a lot of the farm inspections I did and processor inspections, but mostly farm inspections, were for these soybeans. And conventional soybeans were going, anywhere from $4 to $7 a pound, but organic you could get $12, $13, $14 a bushel, not per pound, a bushel. And so there was a huge drive to be able to get into this market, but the organic standard said it had to be organic land for 3 years prior. Right. And so just loosening these regulations, or loosening the crop rotations, or loosening the substances that could be used that were previously prohibited. So I'm not at all up to date today.
Yeah.
But that was what was discouraging to me. Like, wow, I left one industry to get into something that I felt like was a little more agreeable with my morals and my ethics, and wow, they're going to pull the rug out from that one too.
Yeah. So let's get back to you in terms of your health journey and everything. And
sure, yeah.
So we'll get back to that part. But growing up, what's the conventional diet? Did you have any health issues at all? Any health problems, challenges?
Not growing up, no, not at all. And it wasn't until in my 30s, mid 30s, that it started to creep in a little bit. Maybe late 30s, early 40s is when it really started to kind of ratchet up a little bit, for sure. So, but growing up, no problems. I didn't have, I wasn't asthmatic. I was a healthy kid, growing up, never had any issues. I will say that, like, once or twice a year as a kid, like strep throat would be like a normal thing. And there were, doses of penicillin to be had for sure. Growing up.
So what was the catalyst to you starting to change to a healthier lifestyle, diet? Where did that start for you?
For me, it was early 40s when it really started to take hold. I went in for a doctor visit, and they're like, "Hey, Brett, your cholesterol's starting to creep up a little bit. Your blood pressure's a little elevated. Your weight's a little high. How much do you drink? How many drinks do you consume? Are you a social drinker, or like these questions were starting to like come up from my doctor, and they were starting to mention cholesterol lowering medications and blood
Wow.
pressure medications and some of these things in early 40s that I think in today's day and age is pretty normal. And it kind of set me back a little bit. Like, I don't think I really want to get into that. I don't want to go down that route. And so I maybe, just watched what I ate a little bit.
Yeah. Do you remember where your cholesterol or blood pressure were?
Not exactly. I mean, they were inching over what the Western medicine deemed as acceptable.
Right.
Like
Okay.
I was getting out of the normal and into medication ranges.
Yeah. Sure.
I can't remember exactly what those numbers were today.
Sure.
And I had a history in my family. My grandfather had passed away early. Like he was in his early 60s, and had some family history of that. And I think it was less family history and more less genetics and more just lifestyle. I didn't want to really go down that path, so I began to kind of just watch things a little bit, and didn't really change too much, but just watch things a little bit. And I began to experience my career changed, and we can get into that a little bit too. It changed again after the organic inspection realm, but my career changed, where I was in an industry that was definitely into heavy eating, heavy drinking, and that sort of thing. And I was a participant in that for sure. And that coupled with, just lifestyle choices, not good sleep, stress, maybe trying to exercise too intensively for what my capabilities were, just a lot of the lifestyle habits weren't in good, and it was all adding up to about 2 or 3 times a year I was getting bronchitis, and like this bronchitis would lead to like severe sore throat and swollen glands in my neck, and shallow painful breathing. And 2 or 3 times a year I would miss work and go in, and they would prescribe antibiotics, and I'd eat the antibiotics, and just I was getting in this cycle of just like poor health. And it culminated in 2014. Pretty stressful time in my career, and stressful lifestyle habits and that sort of thing. And I got shingles, and I was dealing with some of these other blood pressure and cholesterol, and I was like, all right, I gotta make a serious change. I missed about 2 weeks of work with shingles, and I was like, I gotta make a change. I'm kind of hitting my rock bottom here of what I feel like is acceptable for a human to exist in the world in a healthy manner, and so I gotta make a change. And so I convinced my wife to go vegan. So we went from being just like charcuterie eating, beer drinking, spirits drinking Midwesterners to whole food, plant-based overnight. So it was August 1st, 2014 when I made that change. And I started seeing results right out of the chute.
How did you make that decision to go vegan? What was it that made you do that?
Kind of an interesting backstory. when I was living in Wisconsin and working for the juice company up there, there was a little natural food section in the grocery store there. And I came across a juicing book. So this was like 97, 98. Came across a juicing book by Steve Meyerowitz, Sprout Man.
Sprout Man.
Yeah. And so I don't know what it was about this book, but I picked it up and I was intrigued by it. I'm like, juicing, you know, I was working for a commercial juice company, but I'm like, juicing, like this is real juice, you know? So I bought this book. I still got it today. I've got it on my corner table over here. But I started investigating this stuff even while I was living this life of terrible lifestyle habits. I was investigating all along. And when YouTube came around, I was watching, like, you know, some of these YouTubers talking about health and lifestyle and raw living foods, be it Dan McDonald or Ted Carr or whoever, you know, just watching these guys all along, but living a totally completely different lifestyle than what they were.
Yeah.
And so when it finally got to the point where I needed to take action, I felt like I already had knowledge of what I needed to do. I just needed to execute it. And so I started with just whole food plant-based, and I did that for a few years, and kind of felt like there was more. You know, my aches and pains went away. I started, you know, my blood numbers started coming back into line, but I felt like there was more there. And so it was really 2017 when I started, I drug out the old Champion juicer that I had bought back in the late 90s and started putting it to work. And it was really when I started incorporating more of the raw foods and green juices and paying really close attention to what I was putting into my body that things really started to change in a good way for me.
Wow.
Yeah, just it really took off at that point.
And what you obviously talk about Juice Feaster. What was your program like? What was a typical day like, or how did that work for you?
Yeah, so I did the whole food plant-based routine for a few years until 2017, and I kind of felt like I had another level of health that I wanted to go for. I still had I was carrying a little bit of extra weight, and so I just felt like I needed to just smoke out whatever it was in me and burn it out, you know, in layperson's terms, I guess. And so I felt called to do like a cleanse of some sort. And so I was investigating, like, what can I do safely in a way that would allow me to carry out my daily life activities and still be able to cleanse. Like I don't have the ability to go to a retreat center for a couple months and do, you know, 30-day water fast. What can I do to carry out life's daily rigors and still get the same effects?
Yeah.
And so I did as much research as I could, and I had tried some short juice fasts in the past and failed miserably. Like I'd make it like a day and a half and then I'd go get pizza, you know, just like I would just fail miserably at them. And I figured out that what I was doing incorrectly, I was just not consuming enough calories. Right. And I kind of figured that out and made the differentiation between a juice fast and a juice feast. The light bulb went off in my head, and I'm certainly not the originator of the juice feast, but a lot of the people who were talking about it made sense to me. And so I tried it. I tried it slowly. I tried a day, then I tried a couple days, and I'm like, hey, I can do this. I still have energy. I'm getting all the calories I need. This is good. And so in January of 2018, I guess November of 2017, I created the account Juice Feaster as a way just to have some accountability to myself and keep track of what I was doing. And January 1st, I embarked upon a 30-day juice feast where I was going to consume nothing but juice only for 30 days. And that 30 days really was transformational for me to a point. It was the impetus for me to kind of change my career out of what I was doing at that point in time into something completely different that was more in line with what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. So,
Really cool.
yeah.
What were you talking? You mentioned that you were in an industry where you were there was lots of food and lots of drink. What was it you were doing then?
Yeah, so I continued the commercial juice theme, but my wife and I started a business in 2005, thereabouts, where we started making juice and fermenting it. So we we created a winery that specialized in producing hard cider and mead. So
Oh wow.
fermented beverages made with honey. So still in the juice industry
Uh-huh.
per se, but fermented juice. So we ran that from 2014 up until 2019, and we sold it in 2019. Kind of as a result of what I did there in January of 2018 during that juice feast. During that juice feast, I decided I no longer wanted to be in the alcohol industry. I no longer wanted to be a part of that. My wife had been done. She was ready to be done with it way before I was, but it took me to kind of knock myself in my own head to figure that out for myself. So once I got through with that juice feast, I said, you know what? This is not the world I need to be in anymore.
Right.
And
Interesting.
we made the decision to sell it. We sold the company in 2019, and I'm doing what I do now.
Cool. And let's tell me about some of the results you had with your dietary. I believe you lost some weight and things like that. What can you talk about there?
Yeah, definitely lost weight. I think one of the issues I see with people who embark upon juicing as kind of a cleanse mechanism is oftentimes they'll do it and they'll get on this roller coaster of cleanse, binge, cleanse, binge, cleanse, binge. And that's one thing that I've really tried to work on, putting together protocols to help people that prevents them from doing that.
Yeah.
And I would
Yeah.
I would I would much rather see people eat fruit all day long every day than and succeed than to go on a juice feast and fail and
Right.
end up getting into this binge cycle.
Do you know,
Um,
it's one. I think we should focus on that for a second because it's so common that cycle of binging and fasting and it's. I mean, it's very frustrating when you if you come across someone that's doing that because it becomes almost a never-ending cycle. Like they
yeah,
keep many people do it for a long and I had one person that I was helping and when she was telling me what she was eating during the week, it was like she was nearly eating nothing. Like it
yeah,
was nearly a fast, and then the weekend was binge, and it was, and then because she'd binged at the weekend, she would fast again, and you're just like it was so frustrating to see this, and I think that people don't realize as well, it never works, like because they're
no,
usually doing it for weight loss for whatever reason, and that the idea is funny because people don't get this, but you could literally fast for 3 days or 4 days and binge the rest of the week, and you could gain weight, and it
I know.
doesn't make sense, but it totally happens all the time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's the one thing that it's super frustrating to me as well. And it's an easy cycle to get into because you feel so good when you're on a juice fast or juice cleanse or juice feast. And then when you come out of that, if you're not super conscious of what you're doing and your goals and your mindset, you can very easily roll right back into a lifestyle that is not on
Yeah,
par with what you want it to be, and it's not healthy. I think it's very unhealthy to get into those cycles, and it's
yeah,
definitely something I don't advocate, and try and
yeah.
help people to avoid those things for sure.
Yeah, yeah. So, what, I guess, where are you at now? What's your typical day, or what would be your ideal day, I suppose, or what's your where are you at?
Yeah, so what I aim for is stability. You know, I aim for that kind of consistent routine where I am really just focused on, you know, abundant fruit, some good green juices, and a nice big salad in the evening. And if I can keep with that routine day in and day out consistently, then I'm really happy. I feel really good. I'm satiated. I'm energized. I'm, you know, my mood is calm and even. I have no highs and lows with that. And that's what
Yeah,
I'm really after. So,
I, yeah. I really like what you're saying there, because the there's something really important to people about routine and consistency,
mhm.
and even like, I think it's very good for people to have a plan. And some people sometimes resist these kind of things, and resist that. They want to be in certain personality types. They maybe want to be spontaneous and free to do what they like and change things. And but I I'm very like you. Like, I just don't. I think that the consistency is way more important. And it allows you to not have to spend much mental energy
Mhm.
about what am I going to eat today, and trying all these different things. And I think that definitely people can have a time of the week or the weekend or certain times when they do experiment with other things. But in terms of getting results, when people can get consistent, can get in a habit, it can become routine. It's I believe that's way more powerful, and it avoids that thing you're talking about, the cycle, the thing of like, how do I feel today? Oh, I don't really feel like eating today. Okay, then how do I feel? And then it becomes 7 o'clock at night. All of a sudden, they binge to the max, because when you're just trying to go along with how you're feeling, sometimes it's not the best way of doing things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. So, you know, like today, for example, I've had a liter of pineapple juice. I've had a liter of just fruit smoothie, which was grapefruit juice, banana, and some mixed berries. And that's what I've had so far. You know, we're midday. I'm starting to get a little bit of hunger rolling in now. So I'll probably have another big bowl of mixed fruit and a huge salad, and that'll be my day. And so
That's amazing.
if I can
Yeah,
start it off with juice and fruit and kind of keep that through the day, like you say, the simplicity of it is so amazing. Like I love some of these amazing recipe creators that we have in the raw food world. They make some of the most amazing raw recipes, you know, lettuce boat tacos and lasagna, raw vegan lasagna. And these things are amazing. And I've bought all these books, you know, the vegan raw vegan bundle. I've got it, you know, and I make some of those, but it's I'm lazy when it comes to making recipes and making things like that. So I just like to keep it simple, as much fruit and easy
yeah,
juices to make, and then throw together a easy big salad, raw
yeah.
salad in the evening with a low fat dressing from
I think
Raw
as
Food
well,
Romance.
yeah, you sort of find the recipes you like, and it's I feel like you don't need that many. I think it's good to get these books to experiment and find the things that you like, and then once
Yeah,
you don't really you don't need that much. Maybe some people are different, but I find that I it's my personality, but I can get very fixed on one thing for a long period of time. Like, I can just do the same
yeah.
thing over and over. I'm totally happy.
Yeah, me too. My wife is different. She can't eat the same thing twice, you know,
Right.
more than a couple days in a row. But man,
Yep.
I can eat the same thing over and over again. So
Yeah.
everybody's a little
Yeah.
different in that regard, for sure. I like to
Yeah.
keep it simple and just stay satiated.
So juicing, I see, like, I think there's something about juicing that is captivating to people who aren't even vegan. You know what I mean? Like, there's
Hmm,
people,
sure.
I've met people who are not vegan, not vegetarian, not anything, and they try a juice
Hmm.
out of the blue, like maybe for weight loss, or they're trying to get into a particular suit for a wedding, whatever it is, and they do a juice fast. And I know that John Rose, who's a guy on YouTube that had quite a big following and was a mentor to Julio Christina, and he, in his opinion, the juice fast was the best way of getting people to start getting into raw foods and everything. And I don't know. Maybe that is the case. I've not experienced it, and I've never done a juice fast myself, so I don't exactly know. I'd like to know from you, what are some of the mistakes people make with juice fasting? I think you alluded to not drinking,
Mm.
not eating enough, essentially. But
Yeah.
what do you see with people that are reaching out to you?
Yeah, calories is probably the number one mistake that people make, is that they'll underconsume calories and try and carry out their daily life's activities and work out and
Yeah,
go to work and do all these things on 900 calories a day.
yeah,
And
and it's okay for the first 4 or 5 hours of the day. So,
yeah, right. Then you need to do it again. You need to have that much more the rest of the
yeah,
day. I've looked at some of the, and I made the same mistake, so no judgment
yeah,
whatsoever. I attempted some juice fasts in 2007, 2008 was when my health started to, I started to get those messages from the doctors, and I attempted them. And, like I said, we'd make it till Saturday evening or Sunday morning, starting on a Friday. And we're like, hey, let's go get pizza. But I look back
yeah,
now at what I was consuming, and I would maybe have like a liter and a half of juice for the day, just like
right,
48 ounces of juice and maybe 600 to 900 calories. And you just can't, no one can do that for an extended period of time and
right,
not expect themselves to just want to binge like crazy at the end of it. And I've seen
yeah,
some commercial juice cleanses or juice bar cleanses where they'll have 4 or 5 16-ounce or half pint, half liter um, juices for the day. And when you do the math, kind of estimate the math in terms of calories for the day, it's just not enough. It's just
yeah,
not
yeah.
enough.
And people go to these like juice bars, and there's some super expensive juice bars around, and they might get a juice plan, and you're just thinking, there's no way that's going to be, and they're spending so much money for so little,
Juice, yeah.
yeah, so little
Yeah,
juice.
there's one popular cleanse that I've seen. You can order it online and have it shipped direct to your door, and it's like $150 US dollars, and it's for 3 days, and it's literally like 5 16-ounce juices for the day. So you're getting like 2 liters of juice, and so you're maybe
Yeah,
600 to 900 calories. It's just not enough.
yeah, yeah,
Not
yeah.
gonna not gonna fare well.
So, one second.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
the other thing that I see people often do, that I feel like it's an issue, is they'll um, feel prompted to do a juice cleanse or juice fast or juice feast, and they'll just jump right into it, just like
right.
cold turkey, pull the rug out from whatever they were eating before and just start drinking juice. And I think no matter what you're eating, whether it's the standard Western diet or meat or animal products, or whether you're eating a whole food plant-based diet or a raw food diet, just to jump directly into a juice fast like that is very shocking to the system. And so I recommend I recommend people gradually ease into these things and practice a little bit and keep everything the same in your current lifestyle, and add in a half pint of juice, and just
Yeah,
begin to acclimate your system a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah,
And I see people do that a lot too. And I think then they're like, oh, I feel terrible. I'm on day 3 of juice and I've got a headache and I'm nauseous, and my joints hurt and I'm cold. And it's like, yeah, your entire microbiome was used to eating whatever it was, and all of a sudden you changed it. And so, like, which requires a totally different microbiome to like go to juices only. And so, like,
yeah,
your body is like in complete shock. And so I really encourage people to be gentle with whatever it is they do. And it's a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah, and this takes us up to really what you're doing now, I suppose, with having grown this Juice Feaster account. And I believe I'd like to hear about what else you're doing with that and how you're helping people. So how did that all start? How did that transition towards, I guess some form of coaching and education for people? Tell us about that story and how you decided to do that.
Yeah, so I had been considering, since we had made the decision then during January of 2018 to exit the spirits business, the wine and spirits business, what was the next chapter going to look like for Brett? And so I had been following Ted Carr for a decade, not really practicing anything that he had done up until, a couple years prior to, 2018. So like 2016 was really when I started to pick up the pace a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was right when, so February 2018, I just finished this Juice Feast 30 days. And I saw Ted Carr do a story on the 5 ways that you could make money online as a vegan. And I'm like, I think I'll watch that webinar. So I signed on for that webinar, and it was actually a pitch for his first course, Highway to Success. And I signed on for that and really enjoyed that aspect of it. Took the course with him as a 30-day course back in 2019. Yeah, 2019, February of 2019 actually was when he had the first course, and developed my first ebook and worked on a webinar to do some coaching, and I was kind of off to the races at that point. I've transitioned away from coaching. I found like that wasn't the best use of my time. I was good at it, but I felt like I was better served more in the technological aspect with like juicers and juicing reviews and kind of finding the best juice recipes and juicers, technologically speaking, for people.
Right.
So I've kind of transitioned away from the coaching side of things and focusing now more on basically just giving information on how to juice, recipes, and all of these things, and recommending the best juicers for people's needs. So focusing more on the technological side of things and reviewing juicers and putting lots of great recipes out there for people.
Great. Is that YouTube, or is that Instagram, or both, or how does it work?
I've been the most active on Instagram and TikTok, but I'm growing my YouTube channel. That's my goal this year, is to grow the YouTube channel, as well as a blog site, a website, juicertestkitchen.com. So that's where I'm focusing all my efforts really from here forward, is making a little bit more approachable long term. When you post something on Instagram, it's up, people see it for 24 hours and then it's gone. So I want something that's a little more long term and available for people to see. So focusing more on YouTube and the website.
Sure. Cool.
Yeah.
And where do people follow you for all these things?
Mostly Instagram and TikTok, and then I kind of direct them from there to my website, Juicer Test Kitchen.
Are both of those at Juice Feaster?
Yes, at Juice Feaster. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Cool. So I guess you get a ton of people asking you what juicer to buy, and
I do.
Especially for beginners and everything. And I guess that there's I imagine, not having really looked into it greatly, but I imagine that the high level, kind of like blenders, there's the high level, expensive, last a long time, lifetime warranty kind of thing.
Yes.
But then there's also the cheaper things that work for a while, and that person might not, you never know if they're going to use the thing that much. So where do you kind of go with those kind of questions?
Yeah, so the that's kind of the basis for all of the work that I do in reviews and comparisons is to find out all these parameters that you just mentioned, like which one has the best warranty, which one has a motor that you can run for longer than 10 minutes. You know, it's all these little nuances of juicers. And my goal is to really find a range of quality juicers at any price point, so that anybody,
Yeah.
whether it's less than $100 US dollars up to, 2,500 or $3,000, whatever someone's range is, we can find something for them. Because at the end of the day, what you're doing is just concentrating nutrition from raw living foods. And however we can do that and get the more of that into your body, the better. Whether it's from a $50 juicer or a $2,500 juicer, ultimately it doesn't matter. We just got to get those juices into you. And so whatever fits in your range, that's what I'm shooting for.
Great. Great. Well, um, thanks a lot, Brett. It's been really fascinating. The whole story's been really amazing, and it's so interesting that your whole career, in a sense, has been in a weird way leading up to this and giving you all this insight and information that a lot of people don't have. So it's really interesting to hear this other side of things.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any kind of final comments before we finish off for today? What are kind of the Juice Feast, or I don't know, tenets of health or words of wisdom or principles that you try to give people?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I've always enjoyed your messages and following you and seeing what you're up to. So it's an honor to speak with someone who's been involved in the raw food and fruit movement for such a long time. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and ultimately, I just want to encourage people to keep it simple. Just focus on fruit and juices and abundance and raw living foods, and coupling that with just getting a little bit better each day. Try not to be like, perfect on everything each day starting out, especially if you're starting out. Just focus on getting a little bit better each day in as gentle way as you can. And small gains daily lead up to large gains in the long term. So really focus on that consistent, long-term, simple approach, and I think everyone can go far.
Perfect. I love that message. Well, thank you very much, Brett. And I encourage you all to find him and follow him at Juice Feaster. And I would love it if you feel called to share this video with others, for those that are watching and listening, and give us a comment or feedback. Let us know what you thought of this interview. And let us know who you'd like us to interview in the future as well. If you know anyone that you'd like to hear on the podcast, or if you would like to be on it yourself, feel free to get in touch with us. So thank you very much. You can go to fruitfest.co.uk to find out more about the festival and more stuff, and sign up for the newsletter if you like. Thanks everyone for watching and listening. We will see you in another episode of the Love Fruit podcast.